As we're talking about digital transformation, and if we take a step back and focus on it from the utility perspective and utilities perspective, what are some of the major challenges that utilities will be facing as they progress through this digitalization, and ultimately enterprise integration of their business model to transform how they operate?
Yeah. The very first thing, I think the biggest challenge for them is both a regulatory and cultural challenge. The cultural challenge being the way that they view their business today, right? So today, the utility perspective is, again, monetization of the assets. It's about the network, right? It's not about the services of the network. It's really about the network itself and the assets in the network. So that's a big change. That's a big shift and a big challenge. How do we take this organization that's been not only focused on that, but rewarded based on that mindset and more importantly, based on processes around their product and productization that drives to that specific outcome, to one that transforms into more of a value monetization organization. So my product development is going to dramatically change. It's going to change from managing and maintaining assets to creating services, right? To becoming more of a service company and more of a value-added service company. And of course, the other challenge is that, as with any industry where there are disruptions occurring, that there are challengers that will enter that don't have the burden of that legacy infrastructure, right? And more importantly, have the capabilities around software and technology and advanced analytics and intelligence and digital capabilities to compete and to fill that gap. You know, just the same as Uber filled the gap for taxi companies, right? Just the same as Amazon filled the gap and you know, took over the industry around retail,
right,
and logistics and value chain. The same thing is occurring. And we're beginning to see new entrants come in energy as a service, creating value-added services without owning any infrastructure. And there's plenty of examples out there in the market today where that's occurring, right? So that's a big challenge. That's probably the biggest challenge. Of course, the second biggest challenge for them is the regulatory framework. Right? The regulatory framework still rewards the asset-based business model. Right? It doesn't really reward the service and value-based business model. So that in itself will be another challenge for them. So they could digitalize, they could build these capabilities, yet if the regulatory framework prevents them from being able to implement, execute that model and monetize it in a way that's beneficial for them, that's not going to be a big incentive for them to move. Of course, you know, they'll have to think about moving to the unregulated channel and circumventing that. The second challenge, so there's a cultural, there's a business model, a cultural dimension. The second challenge is being able to attract the capabilities that they need, you know, the talent, the resources and capabilities that they need in order to be able to build the services, the products in the digital world to compete with these new entrants. So that's another big challenge for the utility industries that they will have to overcome.
And I'm struck by so many things that you just said, and they really do overlap so perfectly. Looking at it from the regulatory perspective and how that impacts the cultural perspective, I'm thinking about I've been having some great conversations with several Midwestern utilities, and a conversation I had just last week where we were talking about time of use pricing. Mm-hmm. And this is part of that regulatory transformation that needs to take place in the industry so that innovation can be spurred at the utility level. Well, right now, the incentivization structure that regulators are putting in there just aren't matching up with what will move a customer to ultimately not run their dishwasher at 7 o'clock right after they've finished dinner and move it to midnight when you know, capacity is high and load and demand is very low. So right. You're talking about these cultural changes, and these subtle changes that are happening throughout the industry. How much can utilities ultimately change if there isn't the requisite speed that regulators need to change at as well?
Oh, that is the big question out there. That is a big question. What we're seeing around the world is that some of the regulated utilities are now creating special purpose vehicles outside in the unregulated space in order to address this very issue. And they're beginning to form a new ecosystem of partnerships, which is actually also very critical in their success. So it's really the transition from a network to a system to a platform. You know, we've seen this in the high-tech industry, except the regulatory component is the big complicating factor there, right? And what we're beginning to see, again, in a lot of different parts in Europe and even in North America, is these special purpose vehicles being formed in the unregulated space, and partnerships being formed with commercial entities in order to deliver those services. I'll give you some examples that I think might be worthwhile looking at. So we're looking at a few scenarios today whereby these special purpose vehicle companies are setting up partnerships, say, with dishwasher manufacturers and washer dryer manufacturers in embedding software and capabilities so that these machines communicate back into their systems, and whereby they can then generate pricing signals and control signals back into these devices with the opt-in from the consumer as to how much they want to run it, how much they want to run their washing machine per month, and if they go over that amount, how much more they're willing to pay in order to run the extra cycles. And this communication and control is actually happening real time with analytics in the background, optimizing for price, optimizing for carbon emissions, optimizing for CapEx, optimizing for the OpEx of the whole thing. So we're beginning to see these models really evolve. Again, it requires an entire new ecosystem and partnerships that today the regulated utilities cannot form. So that speaks to the complexities and potentially ways around this. So energy as a service is without question emerging. I mean, ABB's been in this industry for 130 plus years, right? So we have seen this industry build up, develop, and now evolve and transform. And the technology that's required to go through this transformation and emerge, is there. And we're beginning to see the commercial models also emerge. And of course, we're there providing, the technology and the solutions to enable this energy as a service on the edge.